Hey, it's Mark here, everyone. You're a firefighter, realtor, and out-of-state investor. Today, I have a special guest joining us. She's a wife, mother, entrepreneur, investor, do-it-yourselfer, and now a property manager. So I want to introduce Sierra Smith here.
Hi, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me. But how about you kind of give a little backstory on yourself right now?
Sure. So I unknowingly got into real estate in college, but I was actually pursuing a psychology degree, and that's what my undergrad is in. And then I actually have a minor in Middle East studies, which I use almost never, except for it makes a cool party trick because I can, read and write a little bit in Arabic because I have a lot of hours in Arabic. But my psychology does come into play in a lot of areas of life. I just don't work in mental health anymore, but that's where things kind of got started for me as far as real estate was in college because we did buy our first house while my husband and I were in school. So that's kind of how I began.
All right, wait, hold on. In our intro call, you didn't bring this to my attention, but now I kind of want to know about this other degree that you have, and like what was the thought process of this degree you pursued?
So okay, yeah, so it's a minor, and my thought process, so for psychology I had to have so many hours of foreign language, which in high school was Spanish, and in college I was just going to, do my 10 hours of Spanish for my, to qualify for my bachelor's degree. And I could not um pull off an A in Spanish class in college for whatever reason. And I, avoid failure at all costs. So I transferred out of my Spanish class into Arabic class because the professor had higher ratings as far as like being easier to work with. And I was just like, oh, I want to keep my, straight A status here. So out of Spanish, I went and into Arabic, and I fell in love with it. And our professor was from Lebanon, and she was just awesome. She taught all kinds of, religious studies classes and Middle Eastern courses. And I was just like, all right, I'm all in on the Arabic for my foreign language. And I decided to double down and minor in Middle East studies to have that on my degree. And I don't know what I thought I was going to do with it. If I was going to be like a translator, I was like, I don't want to translate for the government. Like that is a stress for, especially for Arabic. I was like, that's way too stressful. The only time I've ever used it was working for Catholic Charities when we were taking refugees in, and I was able to use that skill set helping refugees get placed when they were coming over here.
So that's awesome. So, do you think any of your psychology or your Middle Eastern Arabic degrees have helped you in your journey of being a investor and entrepreneur?
Psychology for sure. Like I said, I don't know that my Arabic skills or Middle Eastern study skills have been super beneficial career wise, but yeah, psychology for sure. Just knowing how people work and being, relational, being able to sell to people as far as my entrepreneurial endeavors go. All of that. I mean, I can't imagine how some people like function without having all of the psychology knowledge that I have, because that just makes it so much easier to understand people and be more efficient in how you work. I really, really think that it's a very valuable skill set to have, even though my profession isn't in psychology anymore.
Awesome. So I'm sure we're going to touch on that a little bit later in our
Yeah.
discussion. I do want to kind of go back to, I think you said you used your first purchase or your primary residence as kind of your building block for your journey and where you're at currently. Can you kind of talk about that home purchase for you?
Sure. So we initially, when we got married, we were living in student housing, like the dorm rooms, kind of off of my scholarship. And the married housing was like, cinder block walls, one bedroom. kind of situation with very old appliances. And we lived there for about 6 months, and then we transferred schools and rented for about a year, a little over a year. And, apartment life was just not what I enjoyed by any means. We got lucky with neighbors who got a lot of traffic. They got a lot of knocks on their doors. And in college, I was just kind of like, this is probably not the best place for us to be living. And I decided to take a look at what houses were for sale. We wanted to pay less than we were paying in rent. We were in Oklahoma, at Oklahoma State. So I was looking for housing, and this is in 2012. So it was post housing crash, which I was completely oblivious to. So I did not realize that the houses we were choosing from were so low in value at this point compared to normal. I was just like, oh, this isn't, too bad. Like we can afford something. And we ended up finding a HUD listing, and it was $58,000. And we talked to a mortgage lender. It was going to be less. I think our payment ended up being like $580 on it. So it was much less than we were paying on rent. And we used a first time home buyer program, like $100 down, and got into this house, a 3-bed, 1.5 bath, with a, 1/4 acre yard. And it was awesome. And we kind of fixed it up over the next 2 years while we finished school. And then we sold it as my husband got a job after college out of state. We moved to Kansas and sold it for $98,000, I believe. And we did our Dave Ramsey due diligence and paid down our student loans with the money from that house. That was like our first big like windfall of money. And we're like, don't know how to manage it at this point. We're just like, okay, well, according to Dave Ramsey, we should, pay down our highest debt. And we really only had student loans at the time. So that's what we tackled with most of the money. We put a little bit in savings, but not much. And then moved to Kansas and rented again.
So I hear you mentioning Dave Ramsey. So were you kind of big on the whole Dave Ramsey mindset, and how did that, I guess, affect your home buying purchase on your first property?
So I was definitely using his like budgeting advice, and listening to his show, I would say pretty often, but not really applying many other principles other than the just kind of budgeting like our every dollar, making sure that we knew where money was coming in and going out. And we didn't have a lot of it in college by any stretch of the imagination. So, but we had to make sure, that if I was getting a little bit of like a scholarship to cover books, that if I had a little bit left over, that I knew what I was going to do with it to make sure that we weren't, going to miss a payment somewhere. It didn't really come into play much when we purchased that first house, because in my mind, I was just like, well, it's cheaper than rent. I really don't see how that's going to be a negative situation. I didn't even think about the possibility that the house might not be worth what it needed it to be when we got ready to sell it. We didn't have intentions of moving necessarily, so I wasn't really even thinking about selling the house until after college, when obviously he just got a job and we needed to move. But I was just kind of like, I understand he's supposed to get a 15-year mortgage, but I was like, but it's so much cheaper than rent. Like, this seems like a no-brainer. So I didn't really let it affect that first purchase too much, but it did definitely affect what we did with the money that we made from that purchase. But I was like, the real estate's awesome. Like, we just made so much money just living here a couple of years, like doing little fixes. I think we put, like a new toilet in, some new cabinets and new carpet. I think we were probably under $5,000 total on what we spent upgrading that house, and then turned around and made way more than that. I was like, this is awesome.
That's what a lot of people start realizing. They get into the home ownership or start investing, and they start realizing, like, man, real estate can build so much wealth, if you're in it for the long haul. And that kind of seems like what you kind of realize in this process. So I heard you say you sold that property, and are you currently in Kansas right now?
No, so we lived in Kansas. It was a couple years later that we bought another house, or another primary residence in Kansas. I had just had my son, and we were looking to get out of the rental that we were in and into a house. And that's when we bought again. But since then we've sold that house and moved to Tennessee and purchased another primary residence, and we sold that one. And that's kind of the, where I found Michael Zuber and got on YouTube and really had to figure out the real estate market, because we were navigating yet another purchase, but the market was completely different than anything I had experienced before in this last year. So I was like, I need to figure something out because this is not normal. But yeah, when we moved to Kansas and we rented, like I said, for a little while, and bought again, using another FHA loan, 3.5% down. We purchased for 138. It was a 2-bed, 1-bath with a full unfinished basement. And again, we're in the Kansas City area at this point. And then we lived there for 5 years, and we did a little bit more work. I mean, we do DIY pretty much on all of our stuff, but we did more work on that house for sure. We put in like a full-fledged IKEA kitchen, and I don't know if that's big over there in Hawaii or not, but the IKEA kitchens are so nice. I mean, everything is just very, I don't know, it was great. And it became even more of a hot commodity when we got ready to sell, because all of the shortages from the pandemic just shutting, all the supply down. You couldn't even like buy the cabinets that we had installed in our kitchen anymore. Like it was kind of like I don't know, we were glad we had it done, because you couldn't even get the hardware for, like, we were doing little fixes when we got ready to sell it. And I'm like, man, I can't even get like the hinges anymore. I'm glad we like got all of that done beforehand, because everything was out of stock. So anyways, we put in a very nice kitchen, I would say, in that house, and that definitely helped the value. But we sold it in May of last year, when my husband got a job up here in Tennessee. So we were needing to move again, and they gave us like this time frame to move of like a year. And they did that specifically because the housing market was kind of chaotic, and they were like, don't force anything that's going to be like financially a problem. But we were lucky enough that we ended up selling at the peak in May, and we got 20,000 over our asking price, and made another, windfall of money. But I say that and just take it with a grain of salt, because we also gave up a 30-year mortgage at 2.8% interest rate. So I feel sad about that now. But,
hold on.
Go
let
ahead.
me stop you right there, because I kind of want to touch on this, because I think you're leading down that way though. But so you've already had, I guess, 2 purchases under your belt at this time, home ownership. Do you feel that you were an investor still yet at this time, or have you kind of that mindset? Did you shift over to that mindset of investing? And do you kind of look back on it now as far as maybe you should have kept these properties, even though you got 20% over asking? Do you look back and would you have changed anything?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had those in my portfolio. That's for sure. I mean, we had the debt, paid down a decent amount and had such a low interest rate, which that was all we knew though. I knew that this, things were kind of getting bumpy in the interest rate market, but I didn't really know any different as far as that it could go significantly higher and stay there for a way longer period of time. So I was just like, oh, well, we're going to have this big lump sum, like that kind of that's going to help us balance out like any kind of interest rate change anyways. Because otherwise, if the interest rates were low, we probably wouldn't have got $20,000 over our asking price if the market was different. So it kind of, as far as timing the market, I think it could have gone either way, but I don't really think it would have benefited or not us one way or the other. But I do wish I had kept both of those. The only problem would be is that they're both out of state at this point in different states. So I'd have to have property managers for both of them. But still the cash flow on both would be just pretty darn good. But I remember thinking every time we sold those, I did not have the investor mindset. I just thought we were really fortunate. I was just like, this is good karma coming our way, or we're just lucky, or why doesn't I'm like, why doesn't everybody do this? Like, this is a rinse and repeat strategy, right? Just move into your primary residence, kind of fix it up, and then wait, and then make bank on it. Like, that's what it felt like we were doing. And I was like, all right, well, let's do it again. But I was, the prices of everything had gone up so much over the last year. I was like, this is going to be the biggest purchase we have ever made. We've, we're moving out of state again, where we don't have any contacts. We don't know the areas at all. So I got really fortunate and ended up finding a great agent that was from the area who could kind of, steer us in the right directions as far as where properties were that we should, be paying attention to. And we had to live with our in-laws and my parents for about 8 weeks while we shopped for a house. Because you had to have the cash in hand, to even look at something when the market was hot, and they didn't want you to make an offer unless you were closed on your house. So we sold ours, put everything in storage, and started shopping again. And that's, kind of over that, from when we listed our house to while we started shopping for the one in Tennessee, is when I got on YouTube and I was trying to figure stuff out as far as the housing market, like what's it like in Tennessee and why is everything so hot there, and Nashville was a very poppin' market. And we're about an hour east of Nashville where we landed. And that's when I found Zuber. And I was just like, I remember Googling, like, what happens if I decide not to sell my house? Like, I was like, that's when it hit me that I should have been keeping it as a rental. And I was like, oh no, I don't think I can back out of the sale. Like, I'm under contract. I don't think I could do it without any legal repercussions. So I was like, I guess I'm just going to have to stick with that. And then, and then when we started looking for the house here, I was like, okay, but I want it to have some sort of potential for a rental, because I want the cash flow from that, because I could have had the cash flow from this house that we're selling, and now I'm regretting it. And so we started looking for a house here that we would have an ADU potential. So either the land to build one on, or a garage to have an apartment, or a mother-in-law suite, or something like that. And we ended up in this house, which has a add-on that is a master suite that we are converting into its own kind of standalone studio situation that we can Airbnb once it's finished. So, and then, so then on the purchase of this house, we had initially wanted to do the Dave Ramsey thing, where we put, all of the money that we just made down on it to get the best rate and a 15-year mortgage. And like I said, we reconsidered everything kind of midway, and decided to kind of split our funds that we had, and we put half of them down on this, and I kept the other half to use for a single family rental after we closed on this. So I consider this house our first deal, because Zuber really, changed our mind about how to use our money and leverage it in the best way to produce cash flow. And so changing the financing on this purchase really is going to twofold benefit us, because we'll have the Airbnb potential, and then we ended up purchasing a single family rental just last month with the remaining of our funds.
So this is an amazing journey, and what I'm hearing is, in the beginning, you kind of had a little bit of Dave Ramsey influence on your mindset and your finances, and then things kind of shifted once you found, Michael Zuber. So those of you that aren't familiar, Michael Zuber from One Rental at a Time, I highly recommend his course, his books. I mean, amazing content out there on YouTube, social media. But for Sierra, it sounds like, you found him on social media, and his message kind of resonated with you. So what was he saying that kind of got your mindset to shift, that kind of, attracted you to his philosophy on real estate?
Okay, so the first thing I needed to be convinced of it was that like $300 a month was to make a difference, a big lump sum, like in my bank account. And because when I was thinking about our house in Kansas City and thinking about the cash flow, I was like, $300 a month is just that. I mean, that's not really appealing when I think about how much that's going to give me at the end of the year. But I hadn't really thought of it as far as a retirement plan or as an alternative to savings. And when he talks about just getting to 4 properties, I was like, okay, now, $1,400 a month in cash flow that is appealing. And you can get there. You just have to stack them one at a time. And so I was like, okay, that seems achievable, and that seems, appealing. And then, when we got this lump sum from the sale of our house, and I saw that the bank was giving us like 12 cents at the end of the month, on the balance. I was like, that. Okay, so now, now $300 looks good compared to this 12 cents. I'm like, that makes a lot more sense. And I already know from my experience that if I just sit and wait 5 years, the house is going to be, even more of an asset than it is when I purchase it. So I have that experience to fall back on, knowing that it worked. Waited out the 12 cents. Like I'm going to get the cash flow hopefully from this Airbnb, and that's really just going to help us with our mortgage. It's not really going to be, we're not intending that to be like a huge money maker for us, but and then we have the single family rental that is going to cash flow almost 325 a month, kind of depending on the renter I get in there. But yeah, so I'm just kind of like, now I'm thinking of it as an alternative to savings, and he really kind of convinced me of how it all works together to be more appealing than in my mind thinking like, 250 or $300 a month is not. I would rather have, the 30 grand in my bank account. And then I saw that 12 cents and I was like, no, I wouldn't. What am I going to do? Just let it stare at it for 6 months, or move it out and kind of use it as a retirement plan for myself? Because since I'm self-employed, I need something, going for myself. And so I'm going to use it kind of like that for me. And then my husband has a regular W-2 job, and he has his 401k, which we use for the reserves initially. So now we feel like we're a little more, diversified, which is apparently good. And we're just now kind of thinking that far in the future.
Awesome. So, also kind of what I'm hearing is this property that you recently closed on. Is that in the same neighborhood, or how far away is this property?
It's about 30 minutes from us.
Okay.
So it's not we're kind of out in the country out here. We're pretty rural, but it's in one of the bigger cities, about 30 minutes from here.
And are you going to have a property manager for that, or you're going to self-manage?
We're planning to self-manage. At this point, we feel pretty handy from fixing up our last two houses and working on this one to get that master suite ready to go. And so we're gonna try self-managing. We're set up with Himlane right now, which we're enjoying as far as a like property management software. They've been great so far. So that's kind of how we're approaching it.
So I love it. So now, you're an investor, you're going to do property management. It sounds like you do a lot of do-it-yourself repairs and renovations. But why don't you kind of explain your entrepreneurship? I know you kind of have like your own business, and how did that all start? Or how did that mindset kind of help you headed down this investor real estate journey?
So I think kind of, being an entrepreneur, it makes me just I'm a little bit, it's not as hard to convince me to pull the trigger on something, because I like that learning curve and building and kind of mastering a skill. So it didn't take me very long to convince myself that I needed to do this. I do I started a business in 2020. That's when my husband got told from his previous company, to come home and work. And so he was working at home. And so since I was at home with my son, suddenly we were able to team the parenting part, because he was home all the time. And I was like, oh, I have free time again. Like I could start a business now, because I, have a little bit more time to leave the house if I need to. And so I started a business then doing a small batch promotional products. So I would do graphic design, like logos, and then put it on 10 t-shirts for another small business, or hats or koozies or stuff like that. So that's kind of what I got started doing. I did a little bit of graphic design work just online, and selling products through kind of a drop shipper online. So I have that. I have an Etsy store. I just recently started a YouTube channel. I have all of the other things going on kind of in the background that I keep busy with. But I would say yeah, as far as being entrepreneurial goes, I have no problem taking on the next challenge. My long-term execution is not great, but I do know that for me, I can get things started, and then I kind of fall back and rely more on my husband to, carry us through as far as something consistently goes.
Well, maybe you can use your Middle Eastern Arabic, minor, and help get some clients over there for your entrepreneur for your business and your graphic
Mm-hmm.
designs, and so you can actually put it to use now, maybe. But
Yeah, that's true.
yeah. So that's the one thing that amazes me is that people sounds like you took that leap during 2020 to start this business. And there's always to me, like for me, is the same thing, kind of during the shutdowns, my whole mindset changed towards, financial independence, financial freedom, and just how risky I was being with my financial future. Would you say there was actually like a point in time that your whole kind of vision of retirement and how you were going to plan for your future changed?
I don't know that I even gave retirement a thought until recently. I just assumed at some point we would, both kind of be contributing to a 401k and have that going for us. I think for myself, I know that I love to be working and be busy, and part of kind of my mindset towards life is, I'm good with working until the end. Like I don't have any problem with thinking that I'm, investing my time productively throughout life. And so I don't know that I even thought that like I needed to have something um, like some sort of financial security. I just figured I would find a way to work for it. And maybe, I don't know. I really hadn't thought much about it, probably past that.
Well, okay. Well, I know during our earlier talks, we kind of you mentioned something to me that kind of was a maybe a not a reason that you like real estate as an investment or kind of for your journey. But I know you were mentioning about your son and how you kind of was looking at how real estate could benefit his future and maybe, kind of put him ahead of other people. But can you kind of explain that maybe a little bit?
Sure. So I don't know whose video it was, but I watched someone say, you need to know your why um behind real estate as far, and that's true for any, endeavor. Honestly, you need to know your, why you're doing it, if you want to really stick it out. And I think the video said like, it has to be something that's very compelling to you because you're going to hit all of these bumps and roadblocks, and you're going to have some, why that's really going to drive you to push through it, because it's going to be worth it, year 10, not necessarily year 1 or 2 or 3. And so I was thinking about, like what was truly that motivating for me as far as owning other property other than our primary residence. And what it boiled down to was that when my son is, and I just did not want my son living at home with me when he's 30. I love him dearly, and I will support him and do what I need to do. But if I don't know what the barrier, to entry is going to be when, 15 years from now, I don't know if housing is going to um, feel so unattainable, for people just entering. We were lucky enough that we got to get into housing when I was 21. And I just have a lot of peers that I look at and that are still living at home with their parents, and I'm just like, oh, that is not that's not a good look, and I just don't want that for my son. If he can at least have his own place when he's 30, then that's my driving why. And he does. He's 5 years old now, and he helps us with everything. He helps us, with our DIY stuff. He always has a tool in his hands. He talks about the rental house, and he talks about getting to help another family have, clean, affordable housing. And he, goes over there and he swiffers the floors while we're, working on, plumbing or whatever it is. And so he's very helpful with it. And I'm like, okay, he's going to be invested in this whole process. And then someday, whenever the time is right, we'll have at least one asset to pass off to him that I think is going to be better. In our perspective, it's going to be better than like a college savings fund.
That's awesome. I think, when your son gets older, he's gonna hopefully you can show him this video and he's gonna look
Yeah.
back and be super appreciative of what you folks did for him. And he's gonna appreciate the journey and what you guys taught him at such a young age. But that's an amazing story. I also kind of want to touch on the whole, do it yourself and kind of how that process is going as far as, are you and your husband both doing the work together? Is this kind of like I know you mentioned earlier, like kind of maybe spending time together. And has this been a fairly positive process of the whole do it yourself thing?
Um, hmm. I would not say we're not the Chip and Joanna Gaines of DIY. There's a lot more bickering that happens on the renovation side of things, but overall, I mean, we both do the work. I my first job in high school was painting someone's house. That my husband worked for them. At their business, and we were dating at the time, and they hired me because they had bought a house and they needed someone to paint, and I painted the inside of the house, and he worked like putting insulation in the basement. And so we've been doing this since high school, it seems like, just small DIY projects. And then we initially in our first home did sticky tile in the kitchen. Like, it was not a advanced level of DIY by any means, but now we have a lot of tools, and we can do a lot more complicated work. Like, we did our first tile job in this kitchen in here, and we know how to install cabinets now, and toilets and plumbing and all kinds of stuff. So overall, it's been good. Now we kind of do more of a divide and conquer thing, and try not to do all hands on deck. But sometimes it just takes two people to get something done. But now one of us usually kind of supervises the child with all the tools out, and the other one tries to get a little bit more done. It's a very slow process to do it yourself, but it obviously is more financially beneficial if you have the time to spend doing it.
You guys are going to be converting one into like a short-term rental?
Yeah, so we are, out here where we're at in Tennessee. We have kind of a mountain view off the side of our house. Out the back, we have horses and chickens and goats that are not ours; they're our neighbors. But it's still very appealing, very farm-like setting out here, and beautiful sunsets and rolling hills and stuff like that. And we're also very conveniently located to some concert venues, and so the tour buses actually drive by down our street, and so it's kind of a good spot for an Airbnb, just for those different reasons. And so we're going to kind of wall off that master suite and make it its own studio apartment that we can Airbnb for short-term rental.
That's awesome. I mean, yeah. So how's so Honolulu, Hawaii, we have a lot of regulations on our short-term rentals. How's like Tennessee? Is it kind of very restrictive, or they're kind of open to having short-term rentals?
So in the hotter spots like Nashville and like I want to say, well, out in Gatlinburg where there's a lot of touristy stuff, I know out there they're still allowing it because the demand is so high, they haven't caught up to it. But in Nashville, the regulations have changed a lot, and you have to have an LLC already to have the Airbnb established inside. And I know that there's been a lot of people trying to find loopholes to that in Nashville, and trying to circumnavigate the regulations. But where we're at, I mean, we're just kind of like out in the county. Like, there's our city, I think it's less than 200 people, I'm pretty sure. Like, we're out here pretty rural, so there's no one out here regulating. I think there's only 3 Airbnbs within a 30-mile radius. The concert venues are actually ones that just have campground lodging. Like, there's just no lodging out here, which kind of creates a lot of demand. So it's not something I'm going to have to deal with as far as regulations go. Like, our city will be good with it, but I know as far as Tennessee as a whole is definitely getting more regulations in the city areas.
So it sounds like an awesome strategy. I know short-term rentals, you can generate a lot more cash flow. Is this maybe the path that you're going to be heading down? You think you're looking more for like short-term rental properties, or do you think you're going to be doing more buy and hold, long-term rentals, or kind of what's your next strategy looking forward?
So, really the short-term rental is for me to have work to do. Like it's going to be something that I want to maintain. That's really for just kind of for me personally. And I know we talked about this before, but I've learned that there's going to be some like real estate tax benefits being able to kind of use that for myself since I don't have a W-2. So that's going to be great for the short-term rental, but I don't necessarily see myself getting into that. Because I think I'll want to manage most of that myself, like that experience. And there's not a lot close by that I would be able to maintain. Really where I would see our wheelhouse being is value add, because we can do some of that DIY and we have a lot of but it's not the greatest markets right now for a value add strategy. So but in the future, if the market kind of caters to that, I think that's where we would try to really excel. And I like that idea of, being able to do a quick flip, like put a wall up or, add a half bath or some of those things that we've done before to do a quick value add and get something back on the market and maybe keep some more for long-term rentals or maybe even midterm rentals. I've looked into that briefly, but I don't know much about the demand for that in our area.
So I like to say you are like way ahead of a lot of people that I've been talking to and interviewing, and you're on a great path. And the one thing I notice is that a lot of people that I've talked to is they just don't give themselves kind of enough credit to where they're at as far as what they're doing. I spoke to you earlier the other day, and you have this one property that you're working on, and the other one you just closed on, and you feel like you're kind of just in the beginning phases, but if you look at it, a lot of people, don't even own more than their primary residence. They don't have one rental property to their name. So, for what you're doing, I applaud you. But for someone wanting to get started or kind of looking at investing in real estate, what advice, could you give them?
Okay. So I would say to really know how you're personally wired. Some people like to be the lazy investor. I know Dion kind of coined that phrase and you really related to that. And some people I feel like I'm way more hands-on and I want to, I'm like overly ambitious. I'm like, I want them to have, nice knobs on their kitchen cabinets. Like, I just want to be like really involved and over the top. And I think just knowing kind of how you're wired, personally is going to benefit you in the long run in all aspects. That's probably the psychologist in me coming out is like, you need to really know yourself, because if like for me, I know that I'm going to like build this up and I'm going to, close on this property and I'm going to know that I can do it. And then I'm going to be like, all right, so this is boring and I'd like to move on. And I'm going to have to know that like my husband's going to be willing to like go let them in when they've locked themselves out of the house. And I'm just going to be like, I don't want to do that. So I wanted to do the beginning part where we got here, but I don't want to do that part. And so knowing how that I can work with my partner in a way that's conducive to manage it for the long term, because it is a long-term play, not necessarily a short-term play. So I would say that's figure out how you're wired and find someone that you can relate to and kind of pick up tips from their strategy, because it can be so different for everyone.
Exactly. I like to say, it's kind of like you got to figure out what avatar you are, what character in the game you are, and just figure out, everyone is a little bit different in their personalities. And like you're mentioning your psychology background, and like, how would you kind of relate that to? Because I kind of hear it, you're kind of talking about it like, networking and building relationships and kind of the whole process of going through finding and purchasing a home. So how would your psychology background kind of help you in this journey of purchasing real estate?
I think it makes me easy to work with. I would say that because I can so easily imagine myself in any of the roles and what those people are doing to get their job done. And if I feel like I don't understand something, I learn it quickly. And sometimes that means I'm, learning how mortgage works because my mortgage lender isn't explaining it well, or something like that. And so then I can finally like see where they're coming from And but yeah, I just think it makes me easy to work with. I think that, and that makes it very beneficial because your team and your network will grow faster and they will work harder for you because they like working with you. And that doesn't by any means mean, don't be a doormat and don't let them, sell you on a bad deal. Like, you have to trust your team for sure. But if they're like, hey, I'm so sad, my agent told me I'm so sad we're closing because that means like, we don't have anything else left, to work on together. And you're my favorite client. And she worked so hard for us. And it was, we were lowballing offers, and you have to have someone that likes you in order for them to be willing to just lowball people day in and day out and look at all this stuff for you. So yeah, I would just say, as far as psychology goes, I personally really like, if I'm going to make a recommendation, I personally really like the Enneagram for a tool to really understand yourself. And you can, it's a set of numbers, and you can kind of figure out like why you do what you do. And once you understand all the numbers, you can kind of see those things play out in everyone that you work with. And so it's great as far as like learning to relate to people and just be, I don't know, just a better human in general and in business. And if you want to be really successful building a network, then you just need to understand people, because this is a people business 100%.
I totally agree. And, we talked earlier about this, and I know people that could probably use that advice and, help them in this journey, but that's a whole nother subject. But I totally agree that this is a relationship business, and it definitely makes the process a lot easier. And I know you mentioned it earlier too. There is problems and things happen, but it's kind of just how you handle it and having other resources to kind of lean on. I kind of want to also get into a little bit of the mindset of it, and as far as kind of education. Has there been any like books that you've read that has kind of helped you along this journey?
So books, not well. So I would say Zuber honestly helped us the most. And I had heard of Rich Dad Poor Dad before now, but had never read it. And I remember, it was just constantly being brought up and everyone's like referencing this book. And I finally, told my husband, I was like, I think we should read it, even though we're like halfway through this journey. I'm like, it seems to be really relevant. So we just recently read that, and it just kind of further solidified, what we were doing. But as far as other, outside of that book, I had the book Think, Grow Rich when I think I got it in college at some point, and I just kind of flipped through it. And I remember thinking like, this mindset stuff is just not clicking with me. Like, it just kind of seems like, I don't know. It was just seems frivolous to be like, I need to write it down and read it like this mantra thing, or this, read it every day and envision it, and it will kind of like, you'll attract it. And I was like, no, which is so funny for me, because I'm like, on the psychology side of it. But yeah, I just did not believe any of that. And now I'm kind of have a different perspective. Just thinking about money. Like, I remember thinking recently, like, I had to learn not to be scared of like capital gains taxes, or, or like being in a higher tax bracket. Like, those are the hurdles that I had to get over. And, because in the middle class, those are kind of trigger words. Like, you don't want to pay capital gains tax. Like, and I'm like, I believe that. Like, I purposely lived in a house for more than 2 years to avoid capital gains tax. But I don't know why, I didn't know anything about it. So, there's some things like that if it feels, money can be kind of triggering for people depending on, how they're brought up. And I had no idea why I was avoiding capital gains tax, or why I wouldn't want to be in a higher tax bracket, or any of that. And now I'm just kind of like, man, I can't believe I kind of like that's those limiting beliefs. You gotta get rid of all that.
No, I totally agree. I mean, my whole mindset shifted after, I started reading more books and getting myself educated. And it seems like you kind of feel the same way. I mean, there's a lot of limiting beliefs that we're kind of I guess, taught when we were younger or raised on. And maybe you agree with me or not, but do you think, like, the wealthy are wealthy for a reason? Like they think differently and they think a certain way?
Hmm. I don't know that they think differently. I think they behave differently. Um, I think that, they have I mean, I think I guess they hold a different set of beliefs. I would say that, but I think that's a lot of that is it's still behavior based for the most part. Um, you can be cynical and still be wealthy. And, but as far as like, mindset around money and just education around finances and all of that, I think, once you break through that barrier and understand, there's really not much that can limit you other than your behavior around it. So we all have access to the same knowledge. YouTube University is great, Google is great. Like you can figure it out, you can read a book. And then after that, it's just how are you going to act on it? How are you going to behave with your money? Um, and definitely, when we read Rich Dad Poor Dad, not that long ago, and it said, the middle class, they buy stuff. And that was something that I kind of repeated to myself over the course of the next few weeks. I'm like, is this stuff? Like, is this stuff? We don't spend a lot of money on much, but when it does that, I kind of immediately stopped. Like our kitchen doesn't have any like finishings now. Like I'm going to put this money towards something that's going to pay me to buy this stuff. Like I got my head wrapped around that. And so now I'm just, trying to follow through with the behavior and say, like, when I get that first rent check, like then I'm going to go buy my gym membership. When I get that first rent check, then I'm going to finish putting the hardware on in here that I needed to do. I'm like, it might be $30, but when it came down to closing costs and buying down my rate for the investment property, like every $100 really helped on all of that stuff. So it does add up, and that's definitely just a behavior thing. I don't even know that really takes much mindset. It just takes knowing that it's a thing, and then being able to work within it.
Well, I know you're busy and I don't want to take up too much of your time. You have your son, your husband, and your property management and your business now. But I want to thank you for joining me here today and giving such great information. But right now I want you to kind of do a selfless promotion and kind of where people can reach out to you and like for your business if they want to order things, but if they want to have touch base with you and maybe ask you some questions.
Sure. So I'm always in the comment section of YouTube. And I do have a channel. It's just under my name, Sierra Smith. And then on Instagram, I'm at Picks by Sierra. And my business page is Sun Peak Official. And yeah, you can find me on any of those platforms. Message me. I always answer all my messages, and I would love to connect with more people. Thank you so much for having me on. This is awesome.
Well, before you go, usually, as you can see, I ask, a lot of my guests about superheroes and who their favorite is. And, we talked before this interviews and we kind of, you kind of mentioned you're not the biggest superhero buff, but I do want to know, like, if you have any like superpower that you think that helps you in this whole juggling of real estate, being a mother, a wife, have your own business and self-manage or property manager. Like, what superpower do you think you have?
Definitely the Arabic skills, I
Oh,
think, or no, I'm kidding. No, no, I'm kidding. I would, I would and beneficial to me, but I would also say I truly love to learn, and I'm kind of addicted to the learning aspect and that mastering a skill and that really leaning into that and knowing, you know, kind of accepting that it's a good thing and not necessarily that, this jack of all trades is a bad thing, or that the fact do any one thing for long term as a, like I don't want to deep dive and be an expert in any one thing necessarily. Just accepting that's okay. Like I'm just, like I said, I'm going to leverage that and I'm going to lean into it and use it for entrepreneurial endeavors and go with it. And I'll find success that way. And it doesn't have to be, thought of negatively. I just try to lean into the way that I work best.
I love it. I love the story. I love the journey. I'm sure I'm going to see you in all the, one rental at a time chats and lives with, with Dion and Millennial Mike. So I'll check you out over there, and we'll touch base again. But thank you again,
awesome,
for coming on. And I'll put all your links below. And everyone, please like, subscribe, and just keep looking for those great deals out there.
All right, thanks so much, Mark.
Bye.
Bye.